Hey everyone, my name is Caroline and I am going to be talking about my 5 minutes in the garden today. My daughter and I were actually headed to a garden center so that we could plant some plants this afternoon. And when I came outside, I saw that the hostas had these beautiful little droplets of water on them. So while she was getting in the car, she's almost 16, so she's practicing driving. I said, you go get in the car and I'm just going to photograph these little hostas for a little bit. And my settings were just a bit haphazard. I think I started at ISO 320. I think that's where I stayed. And then I just changed my shutter speed. And I also went through and just changed some settings as I was going, not really double checking or doing that in advance. And so anyway, it was about a 5-minute shoot altogether, and it was a little bit more haphazard, more quick than I normally do. I like to be kind of meditative in the garden, and this was kind of my daughter's waiting for me, let's keep going type thing, but it was fun. So these are the images that we're going to be working toward today, and then we're going to go over the settings. All right, so here are the images as I was shooting them. I liked how there was water on some parts and not on others. This pattern that was created I thought was pretty neat. I just went in and used a flexible spot and wide both just to see which was fastest. I was using the 135 millimeter on the A7 III, so it was a pretty big setup, and I was trying to hold it steady and have my shutter speed fast enough to capture the drops without having to use a tripod or anything. So I kept kind of raising the shutter speed a little bit there so that I could lock that down. And so, like I said, this was a really fast shoot. I would say it was probably more like 2 minutes and not like 5, but this was my favorite scene right there. I love this one with the band of dry, but that's all it was, really fast. And then I just started to look for different drops to see if I could hone in on one and get it nice and focused. All right, so let's get editing. All right, so I'm in Lightroom and we're gonna look at the images that I took. We'll see if we can bring them up here. My favorites were the ones that had this band that was dry and the rest with the drops. I thought that was really cool. So that was sort of where I was focusing when I was going through these, but I wanted to just show you quickly the behind the scenes images here, the unedited images. And I shot at 1.8, which in retrospect, if I had thought it through a little bit more, I think 2.8 or maybe even f5 would have been better in this situation, simply because I wanted more of the drops in focus. I wasn't really going for that shallow ethereal feel maybe if I had thought it through, but like I said, it was one of those spontaneous moments, and so live and learn. Anyway, there's just like this little bug there, and hostas are sort of the unsung heroes of the garden. They add so much life and vibrancy to dark, shadowy areas, and they're really not. There are people who love hostas, but I don't see people photographing them. But the way that they collect water drops is just beautiful, just magical. So I wanted to inspire you to maybe pay a little bit more attention to your hostas. All right, so if I have an image like this, it's really hard for me to decide what direction I want to go, because the nature of the hosta is to be bright and light and happy and with beautiful texture. And this variety of hosta I just bought at Costco, and it has this bright yellow stripe down the middle, but I really am more about texture today, so I'm thinking I'm going to go black and white with it. So I'm just going to open up my editing panel, hit black and white, and then just see kind of where I can go with it. I'm pretty happy with actually the straight up black and white here. It's not done by any means, but I don't mind it. And I think with a little bit of brushwork and some attention to detail, it can be better. All right, so I'm going to grab the brush tool. I am going to move my texture over a little bit, increase the whites quite a bit, and maybe the highlights, and just kind of paint that on and see what it looks like. We're going to add that right here and just make that pop a little bit. You can see the before and after. I'm trying to make this the center of attention. I don't know if I want to use any exposure in that area, really. I don't think that's probably going to be it. So maybe some contrast, and then pushing the whites a little bit more, and maybe the texture a little bit more, maybe a little bit of clarity, maybe a little bit of dehaze. Just trying to bring out that brilliant texture that's going on. And looking at the histogram here, I have a lot of room to maneuver. It's really kind of a boring histogram. It's not looking too exciting over here. I think I can push it a little bit. Let's see here. What should we do? I'm going to open up the sharpness. Actually, let's take this off and go back into the regular editing. I want to go down to our usual sharpening area. And my usual method is to just bring sharpening over and then bring masking over to meet it. And that immediately gives us a lot more pop. We see a lot of the texture coming through here. Let me look at 1:1. So that's 1:1. We were a little bit in closer than 1:1. Yeah, and I think that's good. And then I just like to start to craft the light a little bit better. So I'm going to lower my exposure and kind of bring this edge down. I do like this white here, but it's a little bit much for me. And I could also bring in the crop a little bit as well if I want to really focus on that area and not have the lighter area be so important. I could bring in the crop. And maybe it just takes a little bit of time for me to think about what it is I want to accomplish there. And then if I want to really help this to look neat, I'm going to grab my brush, pretty small this time, up the highlights. Where are the highlights? There they are. And I'm just going to go over individual little drops, not the whole thing, just increasing the highlights, maybe cranking the whites up a little bit too. In just, general areas where I want it to have more texture, like that. And it's a little bit much, I think, maybe. I'm not sure how I feel about it. If I lower, yeah, maybe bring the blacks over. The blacks are clipping a little bit over here, but not everywhere. So maybe bring that down a little bit. Whites over. Yeah, I like that better. And then grab my little graduated filter or linear gradient here and kind of lower that a little bit. I also sometimes like to add a kick of dehaze in there just to soften the transition. Yeah, let me turn off the black clipping warning. Yeah, so let me go back a bit and think about it. I'm going to hit the grid. Well, where'd it go? There it is. And it looks surprisingly similar to the one I did before, although I have the white a little bit clearer in that one. And this is a little bit dreamier. The other one has, I think, a kick more contrast. So maybe let's add some contrast. I think that does what I want. It just makes it pop. Isn't that happy? I love it. Okay, so that's a 5. I'll keep that. And we'll export that out later. Going through, these are similar. Some of them are raw and some are JPEGs. This might be kind of fun. Let me go back to the original that I had here. And I'm going to make a preset out of this. Now I have a lot of brushwork involved, so it's not going to be a complete preset, but I am just going to make a preset here. Let's go create preset, and we'll just do Hosta. I like to name it after what I'm doing so I can remember what I did it for. And we have light, color effects. I won't do tools because I'll do those on my own, save. And so it's down here, Hosta. All right, so we're gonna apply the preset that we just made to this one, and it's a raw and it's a little bit dark, I think, so we're gonna see how it works on it. I'm gonna go down to the presets and I'm gonna grab the one called Hosta right here. And actually it works pretty well. It brightens it up quite a bit and it looks good actually. This is the before and after. I think what I would do is probably crop it in a little bit because it's so bright here. It's quite dramatic. And then I'm going to grab the brush tool, maybe add some texture, a little bit of clarity, a little bit of dehaze, a little bit of sharpness, maybe some whites and some highlights, and just go over this area that I want to pop a bit more. And that looks really good. So that's before and after, just a really quick, fast black and white. So I'm going to hit 5 to save that as a pic so that I can find it later. Okay, I really like this one. This is really, really pretty. I like this band. So let's add the preset to this one. I am going to go into my editing and grab the Hosta preset. And doesn't that look pretty just right off the bat? I mean, seriously, how fun is that? And I like the stripe of white here. I think it's super dramatic, and I almost don't need to do any brush work at all. So maybe a little highlights, a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity and sharpness, and just go over this. Maybe some whites to really make that pop. The histogram looks good. We don't have any highlight clipping, a little bit of highlight clipping here, so maybe take the highlights off. And then I'm going to zoom in just to see how it looks. Yeah, it's a little bit hot in the highlights, so I'll bring back the exposure a touch. Well, maybe not. Maybe we'll just have that and then bring the highlights back a bit to rein them in. They're not too bad though. I'm just looking for a good balance. Yes, it's like sparkles. It's like little sparkles on hostas. So anyway, that is my 5-minute shoot today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I encourage you to get out and do some photography in the garden. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.